Hey, I'm Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my top 10 favorite games that I wanted to play again right away or soon after my first play of them. Many of these are games that I've played many times since that original first play, but I thought back and I was looking at that first play, and I realized that there were some patterns among these games. Not always between all of the games, but certain patterns, certain characteristics that tied into games that made me really want to play again. This list isn't just games that I enjoyed playing, but they were rather games that had some sort of hook, and I'll describe around 8 to 10 of them in today's video, some sort of hook that grabbed me and made me think about them a lot, and really even as I was playing for the first time, I was like, oh, I want to play this again, right after this or soon after if possible. I reached out to Stonemaier ambassadors about this topic, and the games that they mentioned more than once, so these are games that were picked more than once by ambassadors, were Seven Wonders Duel, A Feast for Odin, Ark Nova, Cascadia, Champions of Midgard, Dune Imperium, Earth, Expeditions. I was very flattered, actually. I think Expeditions, one of our new games from Stonemaier Games, was the most mentioned game by ambassadors, but I think that's partially because Expeditions had its retail release fairly recently, and ambassadors are playing it a lot. The Isle of Cats, Lost Ruins of Arnak, Nemesis, Obsession, Root, Scythe, Spots, Tapestry, Terraforming Mars, The Guild of Merchant Explorers, Thunder Road Vendetta, maybe the most surprising on this list. I haven't heard much about Thunder Road Vendetta, but multiple people mentioned that one, and Wonderland's War. Yeah, so I'll jump into my list. Some honorable mentions that I have are The King's Dilemma, Planet Unknown, Star Wars Deckbuilding, Terra Mystica, Pandemic, Fantasy Realms, Disney Lorcana, and The Crew. These are all games that I either did play right away after I played them for the first time, or I really wanted to play them again right away after playing them for the first time. Let's jump into the list. I think that the mechanisms that I'm going to talk about will make a little bit more sense when I jump into my top 10 list, and let's start out with Orleans. I remember playing Orleans at a local convention here in St. Louis called Geekway to the West when it was originally released. I think these were advanced copies that somehow made their way to the convention, and I was immediately hooked. Orleans is a bag building game where you have a bag full of workers, and on your turn, simultaneously with other players, you're pulling some of those workers out of the bag and deciding on your own player mat which action spaces you want to put those workers on. And as you do that, or as you resolve those actions that you choose, you'll gain more workers and you'll advance on different tracks and take a few other actions sometimes. But for the most part, it's one of these games that has double rewards and a lot of different paths. Because right away, from the first turn of the game, you are choosing workers. You're choosing one worker over another oftentimes that will end up in your bag for the rest of the game. And so it has this element of different paths that you're taking. But crucially, and I wanted to lead off with Orleans on this list in particular, because I think this list might be a little bit confused with replayability. And I actually found one of the interesting things on this list is that most of the games on it don't have these crazy replayable variable setups in play. They are not adding, and yet they are still very replayable. I have a separate video about replayability. But it's almost by, maybe not by design, but at least in terms of how the games are set up, these games have some elements of like traditional replayability, like a few different elements on the board, maybe a different common goal or a different stack of tiles. That's in Orleans. You have slightly different tiles that you're working with that you can build. But a lot of the elements of the game are the same from game to game, and the variability or the replayability comes from choices you make, not choices the game has made for you during setup. And I think this is a common theme throughout this list because I think these games give you the feeling of agency from game to game. Like, you know that if I played Orleans again, that I'm going to have a very similar starting setup and that the choices are my own to make, not that the game is going to do something zany that I need to work out the next time I play. So this is kind of a central theme of today's video, that it isn't just about replayability, and maybe even the opposite of having a bunch of different replayable parts during setup, that you can have a core system that is just interesting enough and has maybe a little bit of randomness that can lead to that desire to play again right away. And that is very much the case in Orleans. At number 9, I have The Mind. Here is my copy of The Mind, just a little game. This is a little cooperative game where Without communicating with other players, you are trying to play numerical cards in sequential order. And the game ramps up. So you start with a hand of 1 card, and you can win the game, I believe, with around 10 cards if you get to that point. It's rather difficult to do that. But the central theme of the mind, and the reason I think I have wanted to play the mind again right away after playing it for the first time, and many of the games on this list are games that whenever I do play them, I want to play them again right away. I'm thinking about them a lot right afterwards. One of the reasons that is the case for the mind is that you'll probably fail in the mind. So there are a few cooperative games on this list, or maybe just this one. No, there's a few others, where if you fail, part of the appeal of wanting to play again is that you don't succeed, that you are likely to fail somewhere on that path from a 1-card hand all the way up to a 10-card hand, that you won't get there and that you'll fail. And that failure makes you want to play again. You want to do a little bit better. You want to improve, and you want to not fail in the same way or fail a little deeper into the game of the mind. I mentioned Pandemic among the honorable mentions. Pandemic is another one where the first time I played Pandemic, I was like, oh, let's shuffle up and do that again. I know we can do better. We can not fail. We came so close to winning. And I think these games, the mind isn't a great example of this, but I think cooperative games that give you a taste of winning, but you don't quite get there, like it comes down to the final card or the final tile. If they're designed to have close games, I think that can lead to make you wanting to play again. I have the mind at number 9 because you often fail when you play the mind and you want to play again and not fail the same way. And number 8, I have the 2-player trick-taking game Jekyll vs. Hyde. I played this with my friend Henry for the first time, a couple years ago. It's a slightly asymmetric game, very slightly asymmetric. I have this under the category of asymmetry here, in that you have different goals. One of the players is trying to win. I hope I remember this correctly. They're trying to win exactly the same number of tricks, and the other player is trying to have a broad variance. So they're trying to make sure that each player wins as close to as many tricks as possible, and the other player is trying to have that gap be as wide as possible, to have one player win a ton of tricks and the other player not win as many tricks, or vice versa, as long as that gap is as wide as possible. So they have very asymmetric goals even while playing the same exact game. And after we played Jekyll versus Hyde, I was like, let's play this again and let's switch characters. Let's do this again right away. That element, that slight tweak to asymmetry. So I think there are other games. I think Ambassadors mentioned Root. Planet Unknown can have asymmetry. Star Wars deck building game came very close to me included in this spot because I love Star Wars, the deck building game. But Jekyll vs. Hyde was the one that right away I was like, we got to play this again, and I want to switch characters. I want to see through your eyes, through this other character's eyes, to see what the game is like when I play with them. So I think you could have extreme asymmetry for this to make players want to play a game right away again. But you can also have more subtle asymmetry, and players might still want to try to play again right away. These are all elements that you can design around. If you want to inspire players to play again right away, you have the control to design around these elements, and I'm trying to keep that in mind as well as a designer. So that's Jekyll vs. Hyde at number 8. Number 7, I have, I think, the only legacy game on this list. There's one other one that's kind of legacy game, but that is My City. So My City is a legacy campaign game where the games only take around 20 minutes. So this is one common theme on this list too. Many of these games are shorter games, but not all of them. The game doesn't have to be short to make you want it to play again right away. My City games are pretty short and snappy though. They're simultaneous play where you're placing polyomino tiles on your own little city and building that city. But the thing that I wanted to mention about My City, one of the reasons that when Megan and I played through this campaign, we would often play the games in sets of 3. We'd play a game, and then we'd play another game, and then we'd play another game, and then we'd take a little break before playing again. But one of the reasons we did that is because in legacy and campaign games, you're oftentimes unlocking new content and leveling up your city, your character, with something new that you want to try out in the next session. I think this is one of the addictive elements of campaign games, where at the end of the game or sometime during the game, you have unlocked something that you haven't gotten to use in that session. And so you really want to play again so you can use that new thing. I don't think legacy games and campaign games have to have these scenarios that feel vastly different than one another if they have those elements where you are continually adding and revising and crafting your character or your city, whatever it is that you're building, so that it is a little bit different from session to session. So My City was definitely a game that we wanted to play again after the first session, and oftentimes when we sat down to play, we wanted to play multiple games in a row. Number 6, I have Crokinole. Crokinole, the dexterity game where you're flicking little tokens, trying to knock off opponents' tokens off the board and trying to score the most points with a partner. And with Crokinole, the mechanism, the category I wanted to mention here that I realized made me want to play Crokinole right away the first time I played it is the idea of improvement. That as you play a session of Crokinole, you are probably going to feel that you are getting a little bit better as you play. And by the end of the game of Crokinole, you're still not perfect. It's almost impossible, I think, to be perfect at a dexterity game. I'm sure there's some experts out there who are really, really good. But I think it's impossible to be perfect. But you probably feel a little bit better than when you started that game. And with Crokinole, it just feels really good. It's really easy to set up. I think that helps too. In fact, I should have mentioned that on this list. Many of these games are very easy to set up. But it's very easy to finish a game of Crokinole and be like, ooh, I feel like I got a little bit better here. I think I can do a little bit better next time. I want to keep going. I want to keep leveling up as I play this game. And I always feel that way when I play Crokinole. Perhaps even more so than any other dexterity game. So that is Crokinole at number 6. Number 5 is one that a lot of ambassadors mentioned, and that is Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is a card drafting game where you are given a random hand of cards, which feels really good. It feels like you've opened a pack of cards, even though you're not actually doing that. You're selecting a card, putting it into play simultaneously with other players, and passing that hand to another player, and then you're receiving a new hand of cards. Get to discover a new hand of cards again, pick another one. I love this element of drafting, but it's this idea of discovery, that you're discovering, you're getting this combination of cards that is unique to you. And not only are you getting it once, but you're getting it every hand. You're getting a unique combination of cards. You're discovering each of those hand of cards. You're discovering, as you play Seven Wonders, how each of the eras work. Whether you play it over 3 eras, or if you play with leaders, it's kind of 4 eras. But I love that sense of discovery in Seven Wonders. Every time you play, but especially that first time you play. Think back to that first time that you played Seven Wonders, and you had that hand drafting element. You had this mini civilization building element to it, and you were discovering round by round how the decisions you made earlier in the game impact the decisions that you're making later in the game. That element of discovery, it's tough to replicate. You can replicate it on subsequent plays of Seven Wonders, but that first time and then that second time right afterwards, having that element of discovery and comprehension, learning how those decisions matter, I think makes a lot of people want to play Seven Wonders again the second time after they play it for the first time. That was definitely the case for me. So that's Seven Wonders at number 5. At number 4, I have the Guild of Merchant Explorers. So the Guild of Merchant Explorers it's kind of like a roll and write game, but without any rolling or writing, or maybe a flip and write game. Each player has this beautiful map that they are trying to fill in with tokens. Some of the tokens stay there for the rest of the game as you accomplish little mini goals, but most of those tokens are taken away at the end of each round. And the way the game works is that you reveal a card. Here's an example of a card. You reveal this card, and then all players can place a cube on one mountain hex based on what this hex is telling us to do. So we're using the same information, but our maps are evolving in very different ways. There's also some goals that you're gaining, little goals, little extra cards that you're gaining that are different from other players. And crucially, one of my favorite things in the game, probably my favorite thing, is that at certain times in the game, each player is going to define their own meaning for one of these cards that comes up. So they're going to have a card that says, whenever this Era 2 card comes up, you get to place 4 different tokens on water areas. And this is unique to you. So having that unique element of building your own mini engine while also using mostly information that all players have and all players can access. But in Guild of Merchant Explorers, same with several games on this list, like Orleans I mentioned earlier, the order of operations really matters. It matters in terms of the order of operations and how you spread out on your map. That has an impact on your gameplay. And also the order in which these cards come up impacts the order of operations for what players can do each game. I love how little tweaks to order of operations, either decisions you make or decisions the game is making for you, can have a significant impact on how the game feels and the path the game takes, and can make me, at least, really want to play again after the first time I played it. Megan and I, when we sat down to play Guild of Merchant Explorers, we played it, I think, 3 or 4 times in a row that first weekend that we got into it, just because we were like, okay, let's try one more time. Let's try another map. Let's just see what happens if we use the same map. It was really, really fun to explore. Thanks to that order of operations. So that is the Guild of Merchant Explorers at number 4. At number 3, We have Clank. I have both versions of Clank. This is the easier version to hold up at this point. I have played, I think, every version of Clank at this point. Clank Legacy, the original Clank, Clank Catacombs, Clank in Space. And Clank, similar to this order of operations theme I've mentioned, the different paths you take in Clank have such a huge impact on the game. You can kind of see it on the back of the board here. Yeah, you can see it. This Clank Catacombs has tiles instead of a board. I think I like the version with the board the best. But you are using deck building. So deck building, I think, is a good mechanism for making you want to play again right away because you can build your deck in a very different way. The cards come out in a different order. But also, you're using your deck to have your little meeple explore this dungeon in an order of your choice. And this is one of the reasons I really love Clank with a map, because right from the beginning of the game, I can look at this different path that is spread before me, and I can say, I think I want to go there. And you can try to do that, but depending on which cards come up, you might decide a very different movement path as you're playing. But just the different paths you can take on the map in Clank have led me to want to play right again after playing pretty much every time I've ever played Clank, but especially that first time I played it. I was like, oh, wow. I took these paths, and I could see myself. I could kind of retrace this in my mind, that I took these paths to pick up these things, to go to this artifact, and then I ran out this way. But you can see all the paths that you didn't take. And so even as I'm playing Clank, I'm like, oh, wow, what if I had taken that other path over there? How would things have turned out differently? I love that feeling in Clank of being able to visualize the different paths that you didn't take and the curiosity of what the game would look like if you took those paths in the future. So I think Clank, for that reason, leads to me at least wanting to play again right after I played it for the first time. That's Clank at number 3. Number 2, so as I mentioned, these are some games that are longer. They aren't just quick, simple games that you can actually get to play again right away. And the longest of these is Ark Nova. So I still remember the first time I played Ark Nova, again with my friend Henry. And it was absolutely amazing to see how much discovery there was in the game through the different cards, which cards came out, the different paths that I could take with engine building, the action selection system in Ark Nova. This is a zoo building game with a very simple action selection system that leads to a lot of complex decisions in the game that you can make. But perhaps more than any other game on this list, I had mentioned this a little bit earlier, but competency. So the first time I played Ark Nova, I was able to understand the game, and I was able to make interesting choices and build a fun zoo. I was able to do all the things that the game wanted me to be able to do. But I didn't quite feel competent yet. I was still grasping how much it meant to gain income at a certain time, or to move up the conservation track at certain times, and how to do that, and how to advance the game, and which action cards to level up. All these different choices the game presents you. I was stumbling around the first game, but still having fun. But then I started to achieve a little bit more competency near the end of the game, and I wanted to become more competent. I wanted to be better at it. I wanted to take different paths. But this idea of competency, presenting players with a complex puzzle that they can understand, they can have a good time with, they can build something interesting the first time they play, but they probably can't fully... They can't be great at it the first time they play. They need multiple plays to be good at it. That element of competency and giving players the challenge of competency, I think, is a great thing to offer them. And Ark Nova does that really, really well. So that's Ark Nova at number 2. At number 1, though, I am literally going to choose a game that you can play again after the first time you play it, and that is So Clover. So Clover is another game where you get to feel clever. By the choices that you make in 2 different ways in the game. I'll explain that in a second. But So Clover, crucially, I think the reason I've selected it for the list is that it is a shorter game. You can play So Clover many times in a row. And at a recent gaming retreat thing that I did with some friends, we really did play So Clover again and again and again. And we had a blast doing so. So in So Clover, you are given a bunch of cards that you randomly put on your plastic Clover mat. And then you have to give one-word clues that can help other players cooperatively decide what position these cards should be in. Because after you write those clues down, you take these cards off, you add an extra card, maybe even 2 extra cards to the mix, you shuffle them up, and you present them to all players to try to solve the puzzle that you presented them. So you get to feel clever as a clue giver, and you get to feel clever as a clue solver. So I think so it's cleverness tied to the length of the game. There are lots of short games, but just that you have multiple opportunities to feel clever and to feel like maybe you almost got a clue right, or that maybe you were saying to everyone, hey, I think this is the right setup, and everyone else was choosing something different, and you want to do a little bit better next time. All those things, the length, the opportunities for cleverness, the decisions that you make, I think they all go into, they all play into me wanting to play So Clover again. The first time I played it, and now every time that I play So Clover, I don't want to play just one game. I want to play multiple games of it to see how clever we can be this time, and what different combinations of words we'll get this time. Hopefully this list has been good food for thought for you, things that you can design decisions you can make to potentially inspire players to want to play again right after they play for the first time. I recommend maybe combining a few of these elements, not just sticking with one. You can lean into one, but I think combining a few of them will increase the chances that players will be at least thinking about your game after the first time they play and wanting to play again and doing better or differently, or taking different paths, different orders of operations, different levels of competency, different levels of understanding. I think all those things can go into the design. You can really bake these into the design, and not just hope that you stumble into them as a final product. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comments below. Let me know if you'd add anything to this category, whether it's games or within the categories that I mentioned, if there are any games that you'd list specifically for them for you. But yeah, think back to the last time you played a game for the first time and really wanted to play that again right away. Let me know what game that was in the comments below. Thanks.